So growing up as a child born in the 90s, one of the most popular toys and cartoons to come out was Transformers. Though it technically came out in the 90s, it was a really big deal. It came out in the 80s, excuse me. It was a really big deal in the 90s. Now, whether it's the toy line and cartoon that came out some 30-ish years ago or the more recent live-action movies, I'm sure just about everyone here has at least heard of Transformers. There was a part of the old cartoons and the commercials for the toys that had a slogan. It was actually a jingle. I know the song, but I'm not going to sing it for you guys. You never know how the vocal cords are going to work without warming them up first. The saying was, Transformers, more than meets the eye. The Transformers were more than meets the eye because in their disguises, they appeared to be regular vehicles. Cars, trucks, maybe a bus, maybe a plane. The most iconic and probably well-liked Transformer, Optimus Prime, a red and blue semi-truck. Now, when the Transformers weren't in their disguises, they would transform into big fighting robots divided into two factions, the Autobots and the Decepticons. But you would never know by just looking at them in their vehicle form. They appeared to be your average run-of-the-mill vehicles. With the Transformers, there was more than meets the eye. In our gospel reading for Mark today, there was more to Jesus than meets the eye. And you can see that the disciples realized this when they asked the question, who then is this, that even the winds and the seas obey him? We're going to look at that question a little bit. Who then is this? And we're going to see how with Jesus, there is more than meets the eye. Our text from Mark 4 picks up somewhat early on in Jesus' public ministry, having performed several miracles already. Before we actually get to our text for today, I'd actually like to look at one of them in particular. The beginning of Mark chapter 2, Jesus heals a paralytic. But it's interesting, you wouldn't expect it to be the words that Jesus says. He says to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." After Jesus forgives the man, the Pharisees question him. And so Jesus responds with this, "Why do you question this in your hearts? Which is easier to say to a paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Rise, take up your bed, and walk'? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins," he said to the paralytic, "I say to you, rise, pick up your bed, and go home." So Jesus is saying that he has the power to forgive sins, which, through faith in Jesus, makes someone righteous before God. But for the sake of those who are having a hard time believing it, he gives them something that they can see with their own eyes. He heals the man and tells him to get up. They can see something with their own eyes. So this is just an example of how Jesus works through a physical situation, a physical problem, to get to something deeper, a matter of faith. Now, the physical needs were important to Jesus. He still healed the man, but the spiritual condition was far more important to Jesus. Now, the reason that I highlight this text is because it emphasizes an important theme that's throughout the entirety of Mark's gospel. Jesus, though concerned with physical needs and physical concerns, cares far more about spiritual needs and spiritual concerns. So faith in Jesus and faith that Jesus is God is deeply significant in Mark. And I actually encourage you the next time that you read through Mark or any part of Mark to pay special attention for that balance of faith and unbelief. There's quite a lot, and it's really incredible. So now let's actually get to our reading from Mark 4 for today. The disciples have witnessed several of Jesus' miracles of healing as well as casting out demons. And they've also heard him preach and teach parables. They've seen him do things and show signs that make them think there's more than meets the eye with this man. So the reading, it picks up immediately after Jesus had just taught large crowds and his disciples parables about faith. After they were done, Jesus gets on a boat. Jesus was human too, and he was tired. He had just taught a large crowd for an extended period of time in the sun. I think any of us would be tired as well. And so they get on a boat and they get away from people. And shortly after they're on the boat, Jesus rests. He rests in the stern, which is just the back of the boat. Sometime after, a huge storm comes. I mean, one that would have shaken a veteran sailor to the core. And I mean, the boat was already filling with water. This situation was absolutely a situation that could have caused someone's faith to be tested. It put great fear in the hearts of the disciples. They thought that they were going to die then and there. So it's understandable that the disciples were afraid. I think most people in their right minds would have been afraid. The problem was that their fear was greater than their faith in Jesus. And it showed. The disciples woke Jesus up saying, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to die?" Words that would have undoubtedly hurt the heart of Jesus, the very one who came to give his own life for the disciples as well as for all people, to save them from sin. Of course he cared. Not to mention that the parables that Jesus had just taught were parables about faith. And the miracles that he had recently performed before that were to show that he was from God, to strengthen that very faith. But for the disciples, when the going got rough, they focused on their situation rather than on Jesus. They didn't really trust that Jesus was God. They only saw what they could see with their own eyes, that this was just a man that certainly was not going to be able to save them from the storm that they were facing. But this man, there's more to him than meets the eye. Jesus, who in their eyes was just a man, was and is also God in the flesh. Now, notice the order of things that Jesus did after he woke up. He showed his power as he rebuked the winds and the seas first. And then he addressed the disciples. He first conquered the very thing that caused them to doubt in the first place. And when he did address his disciples, he didn't criticize them for their lack of faith. Now, he certainly wasn't happy that they didn't yet have trusting faith, but he didn't chastise them for it. And rather than be angry with them, he demonstrated that he is faithful even when they were faithless. He shows, as he had several times already and would show many more times, that he is greater and more powerful than the storms, than the things that cause them to doubt. Diseases healed, demons cast out, storms calmed, death defeated entirely through his own death and resurrection. And right then, on that very boat, he demonstrates his power by saying, "Peace, be still." And while his words were to the storms that engulfed the boat, he was also speaking to the storms that engulfed the hearts of the disciples. He was speaking to the very things that made them doubt God. He was with them in the storm, and he showed them that their lack of faith didn't change his faithfulness. So what about you? You've been out on a boat lately where you've come face to face with a life-threatening storm? Probably not. But what are your storms? What are the things in life that can leave you paralyzed in terror if you think about them for too long? That can take your faith in Jesus and replace it with fear and with doubt. We face very, very real problems in our lives. Diseases, relationships that are broken, job troubles. I mean, there are more than anyone else would know. You know your storms better than anyone else. I'm sure that for some of you, whatever your struggle is, whatever your faith-testing storm is, you feel like you've been in it for so long that you don't remember what it's like to not be in the storm. Pain, fear, worry, they're just a part of regular life now. It's entirely possible that you came to church today just hoping and praying and searching for just a sliver of hope. Deep, deep down you trust in Jesus, or at least you try. But it can be so hard, even impossible, to trust, especially when all you see are the storms and struggles of life. Maybe some of you are dealing with your storms fairly well. And by that, I mean that you've gotten so used to the storms that they don't seem so bad anymore. After all, you've been doing it on your own for so long, just trying to muscle through them on your own. And all you've done so far, it's not so bad. But by trying to just be strong and get through them on your own, you've come to trust in yourself to get yourself through the storm, rather than trusting in Jesus to be with you and for Jesus to bring you through the storm. And I'm sure that there are plenty of you here who would say that you don't have that big of a storm in your life right now. But I know for a fact that each of you has had at least a handful of storms, of faith-testing storms. That is part of being a human in this earth, in this sinful and corrupted earth. Now, after the fact, we can thank God for bringing us through the storms that He's brought us through. But we also know that we will face other storms in the future. And so we wait. We wait because, well, life has been good. Things have been going too well. It's just like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something has got to give at some point. And so we fear a whole slew of struggles that might be facing us in the future. When will the next big family argument be? Is my girlfriend or boyfriend going to break up with me? When is the next huge expense that is going to hit my wallet? All the while failing to remember that the one who has been with you and brought you through the storms of your past has promised that He will be with you and bring you through the storms of your future. No matter where each of you are, when it comes to the struggles, when it comes to the storm-testing faith, we know that faith can be hard. We know that faith can be hard, even seemingly impossible to fully trust in Jesus to bring us through the storms that are raging around us and beating us down. Peace, be still. The words that Jesus spoke to the wind and to the sea, as well as to the troubled and fearful hearts of the disciples, I say to you today. He was with the disciples physically on the boat, and He is with you through the worst storms that life can bring. There isn't a struggle or a storm that you go through that you face alone. I say that with confidence because of what Jesus has already done. Jesus met the very worst of storms. He willingly went to the cross. And there, He defeated sin. He defeated death and the devil, as well as every hardship or storm that we will face due to this sinful and broken world. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't face storms in our lives. But when he returns, He will put all of those enemies away for good. And when He does that, He's going to make all things new. No more sin. No more storms. We know this because He started it. He started it on the cross, and He will complete it. He closed the gap that was between God and man. And after that gap was closed, He came to you through the waters of holy baptism, where He called you by name and made you His own. And it is there that He promised to be with you all of your days and into eternity. And it is because of this promise that you can trust that He will be with you through any storm. With that, you can have confidence that He will be with you. His promise to you is something that you can bank on. So what was true for the disciples then is true for you as well. That even the times that we doubt God, He remains faithful. You can't outrun God's love or his faithfulness. Now, we will face trials and hardships and other kinds of storms until the day that we leave this earth. But I don't want you to leave here thinking that struggling with your faith or doubting is inherently a bad thing or a sin. Faith can truly, honestly be a struggle at times, but it's a struggle that God works through. I want to leave you with this, and I encourage you to use it almost like a prayer for those times that a storm would come and test your faith. In Mark 9, Jesus comes across a man who has a son who is demon-possessed. And this man is desperate to have his son rid of the demon, and so he asks Jesus to rid him of the demon. Jesus said to him, "All things are possible for the one who believes." And the father's response is one that leaves him completely vulnerable, open, and honest with himself as well as his Lord. "I do believe. Help my unbelief." God works through struggles and through our doubt. A God who uses unbelief to strengthen our faith, now that is certainly more than meets the eye. Amen.